Hello everyone, welcome to Cashcroft TV. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Ages of Empires. This is the first episode of 2024, if you happen to be curious. So in this episode we will be covering the first Turkic Khaganate and Bumin Qaghan and the Visigothic Kingdom and Alaric the First. So the style of these videos is, or episodes, is that we will cover an empire and then a significant leader from that empire, then another empire, a significant leader from that empire, and then at the end we will have a comparison between the two leaders in the style of Plutarch's parallel lives. So we will cover a lot of content, but I hope by going through this you will learn more about two empires and two individuals as well as their differences. So without further ado, we will begin with the first empire, that being the first Turkic Khaganate. We will cover the Visigothic Kingdom after. So the first Turkic Khaganate, also referred to as the first Turkic Empire, or the Turkic Khaganate, or even the Turkic Khaganate, was a Turkic kingdom Khaganate established by the Ashina clan of Gökturks. So a leading clan came to create this Visigothic Khaganate, which is sort of like a kingdom. Khaganate would be most closely translated to a kingdom. In medieval Inner Asia was its location under the leadership of Bumin Qaghan, who is the leader we will highlight. So we will highlight the founding leader in this episode. In approximately 552 CE, that's Common Era, or formerly called Christian Era. And his brother Istami as well supported him in this endeavor. The first Turkic Khaganate succeeded the Rouran Khaganate, which is an empire we have covered in a previous episode. So if you have already checked it out, thank you very much, and if you are willing to do so, I hope you do, and I'm thankful if you do as well. So it succeeded the Rouran Khaganate, which was another sort of principality, one might call it, as the hegemonic power in the Mongolian plateau. So we will see it's one of the largest empires we've certainly covered to date, as the hegemonic power in the Mongolian plateau, and rapidly expanded their territories into Central Asia as well, and became the first Central Asian transcontinental empire from Manchuria all the way to the Black Sea. So absolutely massive, even compared to almost all the other empires we've previously covered. Although the Gökturks spoke Old Turkic, the Khagnate's early official texts and coins were written in Songdian, so multi-linguistic. Some people try to quantify what an empire is. Is it one homogeneous group of people? Can it be comprised of multiple? Does it have to subordinate on other people? At least this one, I think it has been qualified as an empire, and I believe it to be an empire too, but it was multilingual, so that's perhaps an empire does not need to be monolingual. That's at least my takeaway, or at least my argument. Furthermore, it was the first Turkic state to use the name Turk, which we have modern-day Turkish, Turkey, for example. And furthermore, Old Turkic script was invented at the first half of the 6th century too, so it sort of coincided simultaneously with this Khaganate, led by the Ashina clan. Furthermore, the Khaganate collapsed in 603 CE after a series of conflicts and civil wars, which we will detail further, which separated the polity into the Eastern Turkic Khaganate and the Western Turkic Khaganate. So sort of like the Roman Empire divided into an Eastern and Western empires. The Tang Empire conquered the Eastern Turkic Empire later in 630 CE, and conquered the Western Turkic Khaganate in 657. So maybe unlike the Roman Empire, both of the Eastern and the Western Turkic Khagnates were conquered by the same Tang Empire, which we will cover as well in a future episode. This was in 657, the western portion was conquered in a series of military campaigns. Furthermore, the second Turkic Khaganate emerged in 682 and lasted until 744, which we will cover in a separate episode, when it was overthrown by the Uyghur Khaganate. So we will cover the second Turkic Khaganate in a future episode. So sort of like we had with the Persian series or the Egyptian series, and also with our Chinese history too. So a lot of these are would be helpful to look at them chronologically, or reverse chronologically, or at least look at all of them perhaps, or listen. So, in terms of the rise and fall, which will be the structure of all of our empires. So, the first Turkic Khaganate, also known as the Turkic Kaganate, was a Central Asian state that emerged in the 6th century CE, playing a significant role in the political and cultural landscape of the region. Therefore, we'll seek to find a detailed history of its rise and fall here. So, starting with its rise. So, the early Turkic tribes, the Turkic people were originally nomadic pastoralists, so sort of pastures, and predominantly nomadic. So it's harder to support a larger population on just being nomadic, not having landed agriculture, for example, but nonetheless they still reached very large populations, both by conquering others' sedentary peoples, but also through just growing through their own natural causes. The Turkic people were originally nomadic, and they come to spread across all of Central Asia, or most of Central Asia. The early Turkic tribes were loosely organized and engaged in both conflict and cooperation with neighboring states, so sort of a mixed bag at first. However, with the formation of the Khaganate in 552 CE. So the first Turkic Khaganate was founded by Bumin Qaghan, who we will cover soon in more detail, in 552 CE. Bumin successfully united various Turkic tribes under a single political entity, establishing the foundation of a more centralized and powerful state. There's a great book I grew up reading, the Wolves of the Plain series about Genghis Khan, and it's fascinating. Then it seems so old, that book, or not the book itself, but the topic mattered. But this is a sort of a Khaganate far, far before Genghis Khan. So, but a similar sort of thing. One tribal leader comes to rule over all the other tribes. So, but he could even be considered an inspiration for Genghis Khan, who came many years later. As for the golden age of the first Turkic Khaganate, as for its expansion and hegemony from the 6th to the 7th centuries CE, so after the defeat of the Rouran Khaganate, the first Turkic Khaganate expanded its territories. So it defeated out the Rouran Khaganate, which had a very much Genghis Khan-like process as well. But even that leader even predates Genghis Khan, and even predates our Bumin Qaghan here. And therefore, after defeating the Rouran Khaganate, they reached as far into Central Asia, and even into the more centralized, powerful state of the Rouran Khaganate. They reached as far as the Caspian Sea during this period, to the Altai Mountains. So absolutely massive. I cannot emphasize that enough, how large this empire is. Maybe the only one to date that might have been close to as large, maybe larger, maybe slightly smaller, would have been the Persian empires, for example. The Khaghans exercised influence over the Silk Road trade routes, contributing to the economic prosperity of this state. Furthermore, for cultural developments during this golden age, the Khaganate played a crucial role in the spread of Turkic culture, being the first to even use the word Turk, from Göktürk. And furthermore, Turkish language, culture, and traditions spread as a result of the Turkic Khaganate, the first Turkic Khaganate. As for the oak horn inscriptions written on old Turkic scripts reflect the cultural and linguistic development during this period, so there's documentation of it too. But moving to its decline, which seems to inevitably happen to all empires, at least that we've covered so far. Starting with the internal struggles, so the first Turkic Khaganate faced internal conflicts, including power struggles among the ruling elite. Furthermore, these internal disputes weakened the unity of the Khaganate and created opportunities for external adversaries. So, as I always note, most frequently internal and external factors sort of feed into each other. If there's a weak internal situation, the external adversaries capitalize on it. Or if the external adversaries are capitalizing on them, then there's more internal strife as well, usually. As for the Tang-Silla alliance in the 630s CE, which sort of started retaining, but after the division of the first Turkic Khaganate. So the Tang dynasty of China and the Korean Silla kingdom formed an alliance against the Turks in 635, and the Tang Silla forces defeated the Turks, leading to the collapse of the Khaganate from the east and then later the west. As for division and fragmentation in the 7th century CE, after the defeat by the Tang Silla alliance, the first Turkic Khaganate disintegrated into smaller Khaganates and tribal entities, sort of back almost to how it was before. The Eastern Turkic Khaganate continued to exist for a while the Western Turkic Khaganate succumbed to inner strife and external pressures. As for the legacy of the first Turkic Khaganate, the legacy of the first Turkic Khaganate includes the dissemination of Turkic culture, primarily language, culture, and tradition across Central Asia. Furthermore, the political fragmentation of the Khaganate led to the emergence of various Turkic Khaganates following and played a role in shaping subsequent history in the region. Furthermore, the Turkic people continued to be a significant player in political and cultural dynastic dynamics in Central Asia and beyond. And this will not be the last we hear of the descendants of Turkic culture. As we shall see, there will be future Turkic empires. However, this is our first formally Turkic Khaganate or kingdom. So as for a biography of Bumin Qaghan, probably the most significant leader of the first Turkic Khaganate. So the most important ruler of the first Turkic Khaganate was undoubtedly Bumin Qaghan, the founder of the Khaganate, and a key figure in Turkic history. Here is, therefore, we will seek to biograph his life to sort of maybe learn some lessons from him. So Bumin Qaghan, also known as Ilig Qaghan or Yami Qaghan, was died in 550, ruled from 552, or established the first Turkic Khaganate, in 552 CE. And he was the founder of the Turkic Khaganate, as mentioned. He was the eldest son of the Ashina Turks, or Ashina Tuwu, and therefore created a Khaganate by making it descendant. The Ashina clan came to rule over the Turkic Khaganate in a monarchical form. And he was the eldest son as well. He was the chieftain of the Turks under the sovereignty of, and that overthrew the sovereignty of the Rouran Khaganate. He was also mentioned in what's known as the Tuman, which is the commander of 10,000, so led a very large army of the Khaganate. So as for his early life, Bumin Qaghan was born in the mid-6th century, and details about his early life are scarce, unfortunately. He belonged to the Ashina clan, as mentioned, one of the prominent Turkic tribes in Central Asia. The Turkic people were nomadic pastoralists, leading pastures, and Bumin likely grew up in the harsh environment of the Central Asian steppes, so maybe toughened him up, perhaps. As for this formation of the Khaganate in 552 CE, this is when history of him starts to become more detailed. So Bumin rose to prominence through his leadership skills and military prowess, and came to rule over a clan. In 552 CE, he successfully united other various Turkic tribes under a common cause, forming the first Turkic Khaganate. This unification was a response to the external threats, particularly from the Rouran Khaganate, a powerful nomadic state in the region. As for his alliance, or the alliance with the Sui dynasty, to counter the Rouran threat, Bumin formed a strategic alliance with the Sui dynasty of China. This collaboration culminated in a joint military campaign that resulted in the defeat of the Rouran Khaganate. So it must be noted that not only was he great in battle, but he was also capable or successful in forming alliances, as manifested or proven with his alliance with the Sui dynasty. The Turks emerged victorious in this endeavor, and this victory marked the beginning of the first major expansion of the first Turkic kingdom, Khaganate. As for expansion and consolidation, under Bumin Qaghan's leadership, the Khaganate expanded its territories, reaching from the Caspian Sea to the Altai Mountains. Absolutely massive territory, even under the first leader's leadership. Bumin implemented administrative reforms, strengthening the central authority of the Khaganate. So something that seems to be common, a reason why many empires fall is the centralization sort of falls apart. But the rises seem to be connected with consolidation, particularly this. It came from many particular segregated states, but then Bumin Qaghan united the states, but he continued even after doing that for advocating and creating reforms that created even a more centralized government that would allow the Khaganate to last almost half a century, or just over half a century even. Furthermore, as for the Turkic Khaganate became a major player in the geopolitics of Central Asia, controlling trade routes and enjoying economic prosperity. And its connection, for example, with the Silk Road, something that, so not only was he successful in battle, successful in creating alliances, but also successful in creating trade with other states, which could be a way of sort of pacifying enemies. As for his legacy, Bumin Qaghan's legacy lies in his roles as the founder of the first Turkic Khaganate. His ability to unite disparate Turkic tribes, form strategic alliances, and successfully confront external threats laid the groundwork for the political and cultural developments of the Turkic peoples in Central Asia and last many generations to come, and maybe even an influence today. The orc horn inscriptions erected in honor of Bumin and his brother Istami stands as an enduring monument to their contributions of the Turkic history. So if writing was not that common back then, the fact that he was written on must is at least one indication that he was a great man. Furthermore, Bumin's legacy continued through the subsequent Turkic Kaganate, which continued to last after him. So unlike others who may have led at the pinnacle, he was a creator, so different from some of the leaders we have covered. But those who lead at the pinnacle, necessarily the empire declined after them. So maybe it's better to be a founder than to be at the pinnacle. Furthermore, Bumin's legacy continued also through all the Turkic influences and the future Khaganates, or future Turkic empires. So as for the content of the slide, so in the information we have the title here, Bumin Qaghan and the first Turkic Khaganate, also known as the first Turkic Empire, also known as the Turkic Khaganate or the Turkic Kaganate. The significant leader we have highlighted is Bumin Qaghan, and the empire is the first Turkic Kaganate, period 552 to 603 CE, that's Common Era. Modern locations include Mongolia, China, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, and of course Turkey. Million square kilometers, 6.00 million square kilometers. I cannot stress how large that is, even relative to some of the most famous and greatest empires throughout all of history. Million square kilometers would be 2.32 million square kilometers. This is 4.45% of the world. So maybe, though, the caveat is some of this area that they were ruling over was not settled land, so maybe it's easier to rule over with a large 10,000 army of horses, for example, whereas maybe certain other regions might be more contested, have more sedentary people, might be harder in certain regions. For example, the Greek empires we've covered are all tiny, but there were so many city-states that were warring, so that is a caveat. But nonetheless, the size speaks for itself. The capital cities include Oturken was the capital of the eastern, and Suryab was the capital of the western Turkic Empire. The government was a Khaganate, which is a nomadic empire based with a Khan. Common languages were Old Turkic was the official, dynastic, and common language. Sogdian, which is official, diplomatic, and for coinage, pardon me, it should be coinage, not kunaj. And Ruran, which was also an official language after they conquered the Rurans, previously the Ruran Khaganate, which we have an episode of. The religion was Tengrism, and population was likely 3 million at its peak in the 6th century CE. So very large, but that's like less than 10%, 1/10 of the size of Canada today. So it's still very large for a nomadic people, and that might not necessarily include their vassals or slaves as well. In terms of the images, in the top left, we have the first, we have a Tamga, which is a seal of the Ashina, the royal tribe. Could not find an image of Bumin Qaghan, but this is the seal of the royal family, the Ashina tribe. Furthermore, to the right of that, we have a panel from the tomb of, or actually, pardon me, two to the right of that, if you can see the slide, we have a panel piece from the tomb of Anija, showing a Sogdian trader on the right, who is shown a welcoming to the Turkic leader on the left, with long hair combed back, something I have not done today, as it is Sunday and somewhat relaxing today and just learning, in 579 CE in Xi'an, China. To the left of that, we have a Shorun Bumgar tomb mural titled Go Turk, produced in the 7th century CE in Mongolia. So we can see a sort of image of what a Turk or a First Tunic Empire citizen or individual might have looked like with his horse, and I think the colors are really beautiful, I find, in that one. And the horse, obviously, they had such love for horses, being nomadic people. And down here to the right, we have an image, almost to me looks like Impressionist painting, but far predates it. It shows Western Turkic officers during an audience with King Varkhuman of Samarkand from 648 to 661 CE. So see sort of what their diplomats or some of their more influential individuals might have dressed, and also I just think beautiful looking piece of art. Additional information, we have the historical era would be post-classical. Some significant dates: Bumin Qaghan revolts against the ruling Khaganate in 452 CE and was established in 552 CE. Turk civil war was in 581 CE. There was a brief reunification of the East and West in 603 CE, but then there was another division of the Western and Eastern Turkic Khaganates in 603 CE. As mentioned, it was preceded by the Ruang Khaganate, but also the Hephthalite Empire, and it was succeeded by the Eastern Turkic Kaganate and the Western Turkic Kaganate, as we covered. And in the top right, we have our map showing the absolutely massive size of the Turkic Kaganate: 6.00 million square kilometers, 4.545% of the world, excluding Antarctica. So, on to the Visigothic Kingdom. The Visigothic Kingdom, or also known as Visigothic Spain, or the Kingdom of the Goths, occupied what is now southwestern France and the Iberian Peninsula from the 5th to the 8th centuries CE, Common Era. It was one of the Germanic successor states to the Western Roman Empire, and it was originally created by the settlement of the Visigoths under King Wallia in the province of Gallia Aquitania in southwest Gaul by the Roman government, and then extended by the conquest of over all of Hispania. The kingdom maintained independence from the Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire, whose attempts to re-establish Roman authority in Hispania were only partially successful and short-lived. So in Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, he gives a lot of detail of these Visigothic people. Supposedly they may have been likely Germanic, came from Poland, then moved all the way to France, and moved all the way. I'm not necessarily sure if those are exactly true, but nonetheless, these Visigothic people have been documented to have moved much around Europe even before in a distinct community, but this is where they became a kingdom and really at their largest territorial extent and greatest achievements. However, they've existed long before and a very distinct community, or maybe the most famous, earliest Germanic tribe. Furthermore, the Visigoths were Romanized Central Europeans who had moved west from the Danube Valley. They became foederati of Rome and wanted to restore the Roman order against the hordes of Vandals, Alans, and Suebi. The Western Roman Empire fell in 476 CE. Therefore, the Visigoths believed they had the right to take the territories that Rome had promised in the Hispania in exchange for restoring Roman order. Furthermore, under King Alaric, who eliminated the status of foederati, a triumphal advance of the Visigoths began. Alarmed at the Visigothic expansion from Aquitania after the victory of the Gallo-Roman and Breton armies at Diols in 469 CE, Western Emperor Anthemius sent a fresh army across the Alps against Alaric, who was besieging Arles. The Roman army was crushed in the Battle of Arles nearby, and Alaric then captured Arles and secured much of southern Gaul. So that is very short description, and we will now detail that history in further detail in the style of the rise and fall based on the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, but also the rise and fall of the Third Reich by Scherer. So starting with the rise of the Visigothic Kingdom, starting with the early migration and establishment. So further detailing some of the that which we've covered. So the Visigoths were a Germanic tribe that originated in the Baltic region. In 376 CE, they, along with the Ostrogoths, sought asylum within the Eastern Roman Empire to escape the Huns. Tensions between the Visigoths and the Roman authorities eventually erupted at the Battle of Adrianople in Adrianople, I believe, in 378 CE, where the Visigoths under King Fritigern defeated the Romans and Emperor Valens was killed. So, moving to Alaric the First, who is the leader we will highlight in specific detail. There's so many great Visigothic leaders that we've already mentioned, but Alaric the First is the one we chose to highlight, and perhaps he's the most famous of all time. As for Alaric and the famous sack of Rome. So Alaric, a prominent Visigothic leader, led his people through various migrations within the Roman Empire. In 410 CE, Alaric famously sacked Rome, marking a symbolic turning point in the decline of the Western Roman Empire. So the Germanic tribe first sacks Rome by Alaric the First, which is kind of a real symbol that Rome would soon fall, and Rome as a city itself would no longer even later be the capital of the Byzantine Empire, for example, in Constantinople, and even of the Western Roman Empire that moved as well. In 410 CE, to Milan, that would be. In 410 CE, Alaric famously sacked Rome, marking a symbolic turning point, once again, of the Western Empire. As for the establishment of the Visigothic Kingdom, after the death of Alaric, the Visigoths under King Aethelf settled in Aquitaine in southern Gaul, which is modern-day France and Spain. The Visigothic Kingdom proper was established in 418 CE, so after Alaric's sack of Rome, when Wallia became the first king to rule in the newly acquired territories. As for the integration and religious shifts, the Visigoths were Arian Christians initially, but under King Recared in the first, who reigned from 586 to 601 CE, the kingdom officially converted to Nicene Christianity, a more closer to the modern sects we have today, aligning with the broader Christian orthodoxy. However, as for its decline, starting with internal struggles and external threats, which will always, as mentioned, sort of feed into each other, the kingdom faced internal strife, including power struggles among nobles and rival factions. External threats also came from the Byzantine Empire in the form of reconquest and the invasion by other Germanic tribes, such as the Vandals and Suebi, added to the challenge. So one thing that sort of allowed Rome to last longer than it maybe would have was that the German tribes would often fight against themselves, the Visigothic Kingdom included. As for further external threats from the Byzantine Empire in the form of reconquests and invasions were also prevalent, as mentioned. As, however, for the Islamic conquest, starting in 711 CE, the Islamic Umayyad Caliphate invaded the Visigothic Kingdom from North Africa. The decisive battle of Guadalete in 711 CE resulted in the defeat of the Visigothic king Roderick, leading to the rapid Islamic conquest of the Iberian Peninsula, and hence the spread of much of Islam into the region. As for the fall of the Visigothic Kingdom eventually collapsed with the defeat at Guadalete. Some remnants of the resistance persisted in the northern regions, however, for some time, particularly in the Austrasias, where the Christian Reconquista would later begin, however, sort of fading out candle at this point. As for the legacy, the Visigothic Kingdom's legacy is evident in its impact on the history and culture of the Iberian Peninsula. The Reconquista, a century-long Christian reconquest, eventually reclaimed the Iberian Peninsula from Islamic rule, contributing to the formation of modern Spain and Portugal. Thus, the rise and fall of the Visigothic Kingdom marked a crucial chapter in the complex history of the late Western Roman Empire and the early medieval period in Europe. So as for a biography of Alaric I, the famous leader who sacked Rome, and perhaps the first one to create the Visigothic Kingdom. So I also noticed, similar to the word alacrity, which is a noun meaning cheerful and readiness, I wonder, I couldn't find if this is true, but I wonder if the word alacrity, the noun meaning cheerful readiness, comes from Alaric, which I think sounds like it. So my thoughts is maybe he was a cheerful and ready person. Definitely clear that he was ready by his military successes. So the most important ruler, likely of the Visigothic kingdom, was likely Alaric I, who played a significant role in the downfall of the Western Roman Empire. Therefore, we seek to find a biography of his life. So Alaric I, which actually means, even, it comes from Gothic Alarcis, which means ruler of all, lived from 370 approximately to 411 CE. He was the first king of the Visigoths from 395 to 410 CE. He rose to leadership of the Goths, who came to occupy Moesia, a territory acquired a couple decades earlier by the combined forces of the Goths and Alans after the Battle of Adrianople. Alaric began his career under the Gothic soldier Gainas, and later joined the Roman army as well. So he's sort of trained in Roman military tactics, something important to note. So early Visigothic warfare may have came from Roman roots as well, through the influence of Alaric I. Furthermore, once an ally of Rome under the Roman Emperor Theodosius, Alaric helped defeat the Franks and other allies of a would-be Roman usurper. So sort of fighting alongside and achieving victories for the Roman Empire before he would go to sack Rome itself. Despite losing many thousands of men, he received little recognition from Rome and left the Roman army disappointed. So despite his successes, he was maybe underappreciated. After the death of Theodosius, the Roman army and the disintegration of the Roman armies in 395 CE, he is described as king of the Visigoths, so sort of the change of an empire, and he gains control over his own peoples. As the leader of the only effective field force remaining in the Balkans, he sought Roman legitimacy, never quite achieving a position acceptable to himself or the Roman authorities, so sort of never lived up to the expectations of the Roman Empire, maybe caused him to fight and sort of want to defeat them and conquer them himself. He operated mainly against the successive Western Roman regimes and marched into Italy, where he died. He is responsible for the sack of Rome in 410 CE, as we shall see, and one of the several notable events in the Western Roman Empire's eventual decline, maybe marking one of the key points in its decline. So his birth, Alaric was born around 370 CE, possibly in the region of present-day Romania. So that perhaps there's the idea that the Welsh people, the Welsh flag even comes from Romania. So a lot of sort of this dragon is also associated with Romania. A lot of these earliest kings, supposedly, at least in some of the Germanic tribes, like the old form of Welsh, and the Visigoths even supposedly perhaps came from Romania, at least the royal class. As for his early life, Alaric belonged to the noble Balti dynasty within the Visigothic tribe, so comes from a leading family. So that's not necessarily true of all of our great leaders. He grew up during a tumultuous period, however, witnessing the Visigothic migration and seeking refuge within the Eastern Roman Empire for a time. Alaric rose through the ranks of the Visigothic military and became a prominent leader as well. He served in various capacities within the Roman military, showcasing his military prowess and earning the trust of both the Visigoths and the Romans, however perhaps underappreciated by the latter. As for the famous Battle of Adrianople in 378 CE, Alaric played a crucial role in the Battle of Adrianople in 378 CE, where the Visigoths under King Fritigern defeated Roman forces, so under a different king at this time. This battle marked a significant turning point in the life of Alaric, showcasing his military capabilities and those of the Visigoths generally, and the vulnerability of the Roman Empire. As for his famous sack of Rome in 410 CE, In 410 CE, Alaric achieved his famous feat by leading the Visigoths in the sack of Rome. This event shocked the Western world, as Rome had not been sacked by an enemy for nearly 800 years. They had often, some of their own generals had sacked Rome, however, in the form of a coup to create the empire, for example, in the case of Caesar, or formerly before that as well. As for the death and legacy, Alaric died in 410 CE, shortly after the sack of Rome, at the age of around 40. So a short life to achieve so much, to conquer Rome or to sack Rome for the first time in 800 years before the age of 40. His burial was elaborate, with the Visigoths diverting the river, creating a symbolic grave for the fallen king. They diverted the river Busento to bury him along with the treasures as well looted from Rome. So to divert a river is no easy task, and an important grave for the fallen king. As for his impact on history, the sack of Rome by Alaric had profound repercussions, setting the way for the Visigothic Kingdom to be, signifying the decline as well of the Western Roman Empire, and foreshadowing its eventual fall as well of the Eastern. It also highlighted the shifting power dynamics in the region, as the Visigoths asserted themselves as a formidable force, and furthermore the power of Germanic tribes. As for a historical assessment, Alaric is often remembered as a skilled military leader who capitalized on the weakness of the Roman Empire. While he did not establish a long-lasting kingdom, it came slightly after him with King Wallia, his actions contributed to the fragmentation and weakening of the Western Roman Empire, setting the way for the official start date 7 years later, or 8 years later, in 418 CE. Alaric I remained a pivotal figure in the history of the Visigothic Kingdom and broader context of the decline of the Western Roman Empire. His military achievements and the sack of Rome significantly impacted the course of European history during the tumultuous, turbulent transition from antiquity to the medieval era. There, and as for the content of the slides, so in terms of the title, we have Alaric I and the Visigothic Kingdom, also known as Visigothic Spain, or the Kingdom of the Goths. So just point out, Alaric I and the Visigothic Kingdom is the title of the very fascinating and important leader. Perhaps even the word Alacrity, it comes from him. That's cheerfulness and readiness, and the Visigothic Kingdom may be the first important Germanic tribe to really do damage to the Roman Empire and as a single force. As for information, significant leader, we have Alaric I, Empire Visigothic, period 418 to 720 CE. Modern locations, France, Spain, and Portugal. Million square kilometers, 0.6, so much smaller than, for example, the first Turkic Khaganate, but a very contested area. They had to go against the Roman Empire and even sacked the Rome itself. So maybe a smaller region, but not an easy region to conquer. Million square kilometers would be 0.23, and percent of the world is 0.45%, excluding Antarctica. The capital was Toulouse from 418 to 507 CE in modern-day France, and Barcelona from 507 to 542 CE in Spain, and Toledo, also in Spain, from 552 to 711 CE. The government was a monarchy, hence Visigothic Kingdom. Common languages include Gothic, was the language of the elite. However, there was also vulgar Latin, because they learned it from fighting in Roman armies, for example. Vasconic languages, Hebrew as well, and Aramaic. Population was very large spread in terms of estimates, from a few hundred thousands to a few millions. So it could be anywhere to as larger in terms of population than the first Turkic Khaganate to much smaller. So huge spread. In terms of the images, in the top left, we have an image of 1920s artistic depiction of Alaric parading through Athens after conquering the city in 395 CE. To the right, we have an imaginary portrait again of Alaric in C. Strahlheim das Welttheater, number 4, in Frankfurt in 1836 CE. To the right and down of that, we have a coin showing a temisis, which is a small pure gold coin depicting Visigothe, who was a Visigothic king of Hispania and Septimania from 569 to 586 CE. Above that, we have the title of the sack of Rome, 410 CE. The establishment of the Visigothic Kingdom officially in 418 CE with Wallia. The Battle of the Catalonian Plains in 451 CE. The Battle of Vouillet, I believe, 507 CE. The annexation of Suebic Kingdom from 585 CE. The conquest of the Byzantine Spania, 624 CE. The Battle of the Guadalete and the Umayyad conquest of Toledo in 711 CE. And the Umayyad occupation of Septimania in 720 CE. Other images we have as well. This is an old Celtic depiction of the Visigoths, and here we have another significant king, which is likely also Alaric I. Up and to the right we have a map. So the first is the original group. The dark orange would be the maximum territorial extent of the Visigothic Kingdom, and the light orange is where they later came to be as well. So as for a comparison between Bumin Qaghan and Alaric I, to learn a bit more about the leaders, and in the style of Plutarch's Parallel Lives, I think it's great to learn about them individually, but by learning how leaders are different, we can actually decipher how they're unique as well. So Bumin Qaghan of the first Turkic Khaganate and Alaric I of the Visigothic Kingdom were both influential leaders in their respective regions during the late antiquity that played significant roles in shaping the course of history. However, their background, goals, and nature of their rule differed in many aspects. Therefore, we seek to find a comparison between these two on those dimensions. So starting with their cultural background, with Alaric I, or starting with Bumin Qaghan, pardon me. Bumin was a Turkic leader, part of the nomadic Turkic peoples who inhabited the Central Asian steppes, likely coming from a leading tribal family. Alaric I belonged to the Visigoths, a Germanic tribe that originated in the region north of the Danube, also coming from a royal family. So more similar on this, they were not both entirely self-made. However, Bumin Qaghan would go to unite the tribes, whereas Alaric I was sort of, he sacked Rome, but he was not necessarily the one who established the principality himself. As for migration and conquest, starting with Bumin Qaghan, Bumin played a crucial role in the formation of the first Turkic Khaganate, leading his people in a series of migrations and conquests that established the foundation of the Turkic state in Central Asia. But it was a nomadic empire, so quite different. They did conquer some sedentary people, but the population was relatively smaller and dispersed. As for under Alaric on the other hand, or like the first on the other hand, was involved in the migration of the Visigoths and played a significant role in the sack of Rome in 410 CE. So he has sort of one particular battle he's most known for, highlighting his military capabilities and Visigoths. It might be noted that Bumin Qaghan was also able to make alliances with the Swede kingdom, for example, so he was also maybe a better diplomat, whereas maybe Alaric I could be equally good as a diplomat because he rose through the ranks of the Roman army before going to sack Rome itself. So maybe they're both significant leaders, but maybe in different ways. Bumin Qaghan after he became a leader, Alaric I before he became a leader. As for their relationships with the Roman Empire, so they both interacted with the Roman Empire. Bumin's interaction with the Roman Empire were limited, as his focus was primarily on consolidating and expanding the first Turkic Khaganate in the east. So he did interact with Rome, but it wasn't sort of the primary aspect of his rule or even the Khaganate that would follow. As for Alaric I, his actions had a direct impact on the Western Roman Empire. In his sack of Rome in 410 CE marked a symbolic turning point in the decline of the Western Roman Empire. As for their religious affiliations, Bumin Qaghan, the Turkic people practiced a variety of pagan and shamanistic beliefs. Bumin likely adhered to these traditional Turkic spiritual practices, so likely did not create a religion of his own, which is not all leaders had done that, but some leaders had created their own religions, and sort of been, also a lot of them have been more focused on religion. Bumin Qaghan seems to sort of not have considered it as much, or at least the writings don't seem to indicate so. As for Alaric I, maybe somewhat similar in this regard. The Visigoths were initially Arian Christians, but later converted to Nicene Christianity under King Recared I, but he was not the one to make the shift in religion, so sort of lesser of a priority for both of them. Sort of maybe they were more both conquerors or at least diplomats foremost, and maybe religion was sort of an afterthought for them relative to many of the other leaders we've covered, such as Constantine, for example. As for their long-term legacy, Bumin Kaghan's legacy is significant in the establishment of the Turkic Khaganate, which later evolved into a powerful and influential force in Central Asia and beyond, and even later Khagnates to follow. Alaric I, while Alaric's sack of Rome had immediate and profound effects on the Roman Empire, the Visigothic Kingdom itself did not endure as long. However, his actions, or at least he was not able to officially begin the Khaganate that was under Wallia a few years later, but nonetheless this battle sort of set the stage for it, whereas Bumin Kaghan was the first official king. So maybe Alaric I, maybe Bumin Kaghan needed an Alaric I before he ever existed, but Alaric I was not able to officially become king himself, or at least king of the Visigothic Kingdom, formerly called. That was King Wallia. As for their death and succession, Bumin Kaghan's death marked the beginning of the Turkic Kaganate, with his son Istami succeeding him as Khaganate as well, so a sort of hereditary lineage. Alaric died in 410 CE, shortly after the sack of Rome, so didn't get to see his empire come to full fruition, and he was succeeded by his brother-in-law Aetulf. Thus, Bumin Kaghan and Alaric I were significant leaders of distinct cultures and played pivotal roles during the time of significant geopolitical changes for both their regions and both of their peoples. Bumin's focus was on the establishment of the Turkic state in Central Asia, of nomadic peoples, while Alaric's actions were intertwined with the decline of the Western Roman Empire and setting the stage for the Visigothic Kingdom. Their respective legacies reflect the dynamic and complex nature of the late antiquity period. So that is Bumin Kaghan and Alaric I, and as well the first Turkic Kaganate and the Visigothic Kingdom. This is Ages of Empires. Thank you very much for your support.